My daughter became a doctor and celebrated by announcing that she only sees me as her ATM and not as her dad. She said, "I prefer to have my stepdad as my real dad." To the man who says he is my dad, "Thanks for being my ATM." Everyone laughed and mocked me. I was calm, sat through to the end of the party, but by the time we closed, the unexpected happened. I will tell you everything. First, if you enjoy these kinds of stories, support us by subscribing to this channel. Click on the like button and tell us where you are watching us from in the comments section. Now let me tell you how everything unfolded. I always thought being a father meant showing up, even when no one clapped for you. I was never the type to expect parades or praise for doing what I saw as my duty, but sometimes, when the house was quiet and the hours dragged into the early morning, I'd sit there at the edge of my bed and wonder if any of it would ever be enough. My name is Marcus, and I spent the better part of 2 decades pouring every ounce of myself into raising a daughter who never once said thank you without it sounding like a business transaction. I worked in logistics. Warehouse operations, night shifts, double shifts, the kind of work that makes your back scream and your knees go early. Her mother left when she was 10, remarried within a year, and introduced a man into her life that she proudly referred to as Dad 2.0. I didn't fight it. I just kept paying the bills. Tuition, rent, food, dance classes, braces, everything. The early years were hard, but at least they were honest. I remember when she used to wait by the window for me to come home. Her little arms would wrap around my legs, and she'd chatter about school while I tried not to pass out from exhaustion. But somewhere along the line, maybe it was the influence of her mother, or maybe I just became invisible in the way most fathers do. Something shifted. She stopped coming to the door. Then she stopped talking unless she needed something. And I, fool that I was, kept giving. She wanted an iPhone in middle school. I bought it. She wanted a private tutor in high school. I picked up extra hours. When she got into medical school, she cried tears of joy, and I cried tears of fear because I knew what it would cost. But I paid it. Every damn cent. Even when she stopped inviting me to her birthdays. Even when she changed her emergency contact to her stepfather. Even when she'd send one-line texts like, "Need money," without so much as a greeting. I never missed a payment. Never missed a tuition deadline. When she didn't have enough to cover rent near campus, I wired her the full amount before she even finished explaining. And each time, I convinced myself that this was the season of sowing. That one day, the harvest would come. One day, she'd look back and realize who stood in the background holding the roof over her head while the other man posed for pictures. I'd imagine us sitting together on the porch one day, her saying, "Dad, I was young and dumb, but I know now." I clung to that fantasy through every insult, every cold shoulder, every silent holiday. Even when she stopped calling me Dad and started referring to me as Marcus when speaking about me to her friends, I convinced myself it was just a phase. The week before her graduation, she called me for the first time in 3 months. I saw her name on my phone and felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in years, hope. I answered, trying not to sound too eager. She said she wanted me at her graduation party, that she had something special planned. My heart leapt. I thought maybe this was the moment. Maybe the ice was thawing. I went shopping the next day and bought a new suit. I even got her a congratulatory gift, an engraved stethoscope with her name on it. I thought about what I'd say when I handed it to her. I pictured her hugging me, maybe even crying. The daydreams kept me warm that whole week. I told my coworkers. I told the neighbor. I told Max, my dog. "She's finally coming around," I whispered to the empty room that night before the party. The venue was a fancy rooftop lounge in the city, something I knew she couldn't have afforded on her own. I figured her mother had chipped in. I arrived early, as always, and sat at a table near the back, not wanting to intrude, but close enough to see her when she arrived. She wore a red dress and looked radiant, grown, confident, successful. I felt a swell of pride so fierce it nearly brought tears to my eyes. For all the pain, all the heartbreak, I still loved her. I still hoped. She made rounds, hugging guests, taking selfies, laughing with her stepdad. When she finally approached me, it was with a stiff smile and a quick, "Hey, Marcus, thanks for coming." She took the gift, barely glanced at it, and moved on. I sat there, shoulders tense, hoping maybe she was just overwhelmed. About an hour into the party, she took the mic. Everyone quieted down. She started thanking people, her professors, her friends, her mom. Then she gestured toward her stepdad and said, "And most of all, thank you to the man who's been my rock, my real dad, the one I look up to." Everyone clapped. She beamed. I felt my heart drop. Then she glanced at me, just briefly, and said, "And to the man who says he's my dad, thanks for being my ATM. Couldn't have done it without your credit card." The room exploded with laughter. People actually clapped. One guy high-fived her. I sat frozen, a smile plastered to my face like wet concrete. No one noticed me. Or if they did, they looked away quickly. Even the DJ chuckled. I didn't get up. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just sat there, tasting iron in my mouth, feeling the heat rise in my chest like a volcano building pressure. I stayed through the rest of the party. I waited until the last drink was poured and the last song played. I didn't say goodbye. I simply stood, walked out, and got into my car. On the drive home, I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove in silence, replaying her words over and over. Thanks for being my ATM. That was all I'd ever been to her. Not a father, not a man, just a wallet with a pulse. And in that moment, something inside me finally, mercifully, broke. There's a certain kind of silence that sets in after your pride has been gutted publicly. Like the quiet that follows a fire, all smoke and ash where your dignity used to be. I sat in the car that night for over an hour after leaving the party, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. The imprint of my daughter's words etched so deep into my skull, I could hear them echo even as the city lights blurred past my window. Thanks for being my ATM. The casual venom in her voice, the way she tossed me aside like I was an accessory to her success, it crawled beneath my skin. But more than the words, it was the laughter that broke me. Strangers, family members, friends, all of them laughed as if I were the punchline to a joke they'd all been in on for years. And maybe I was. Maybe I'd been a fool for thinking that love could be measured by what I provided instead of how I was treated. The venue had been buzzing with praise for her. The future of medicine, such a strong young woman, so resilient. No one ever asked how the bills got paid, how many nights I'd slept in my car between shifts to make tuition happen. No one knew how many lunches I skipped to wire her money for textbooks, or how many times I had to fake a smile when her mother uploaded photos of her new family, calling it our tribe, like I was some forgotten footnote. And still, I never retaliated. I never spoke ill of her mother, never forced my daughter to choose sides. I just paid and hoped. That's what kept me glued to that chair after she mocked me. I wasn't stunned because I didn't expect it. I was stunned because I realized I had expected it, deep down. And that kind of betrayal doesn't burn fast. It smolders. It transforms you. As the party rolled on, I watched her swirl around the room like a queen basking in admiration, laughing with people who'd barely known her struggle or mine. Her stepfather, a man who had never paid a dime of her medical school tuition, stood beside her like he was the one who carried her through it all. He gave a speech after hers, calling her a shining light, and thanking her mother for raising such an amazing woman. Not once did my name come up again. I was just the man in the back who paid the bill. I didn't eat the food. I didn't dance. I didn't speak to anyone. I just watched, observed. And with each passing minute, something inside me sharpened. A new kind of resolve. I don't know what finally made me get up and leave. Maybe it was the way she kissed her stepfather on the cheek for the cameras. Maybe it was the sound of clinking glasses and congratulatory cheers that somehow rang louder than any apology I'd never received. But I walked out without a word. I didn't even look at her. She never came looking, never noticed. I got in the car, turned the key, and knew before I reached the first red light that everything had changed. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to try and explain to her how deeply she had wounded me. No, I was done. Not angry, not bitter, just done. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the plan was already forming. Years of resentment had finally ripened into clarity. I didn't need a dramatic scene. I needed boundaries, firm and final. I sat at the kitchen table with Max asleep by my feet, opened my laptop, and logged into the bank account. Every card with her name on it. I froze them, disabled the pins, canceled any automatic payments. Then I opened my phone and texted my lawyer. Call me first thing in the morning. I want to change the will. Everything goes to Max. I didn't feel petty. I felt sane for the first time in years. There was a peace in taking back control, in no longer living on the hope that one day she'd treat me with decency. I realized that night I had trained her to see me as disposable, and now I was finally breaking the cycle. She hadn't returned home yet. Her things were still in the guest wing. Clothes, shoes, designer bags I paid for, books, a signed lab coat from one of her professors. I stood in the doorway and looked at it all like a museum exhibit of wasted devotion. I didn't throw things in rage. I didn't scream into the walls. I simply called the private security firm I'd kept on retainer for the property and told them to box everything and place it at the gate. If she shows up tonight, I said, don't let her inside. She no longer lives here. The man on the other end hesitated but agreed. I wasn't concerned about legal implications. She wasn't on the deed. She paid no rent. She wasn't a tenant. She was a guest, and I had revoked her invitation. I slept that night like a man who had finally cut loose a boulder from his neck. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up in the middle of the night worrying about money, about whether she was safe, about what more I could do to fix the unfixable. I didn't wake up feeling guilty. I woke up feeling lighter, freer. I made coffee, fed Max, and smiled when the silence in the house didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I checked my phone around noon, and there it was, the first call. Her name, glowing across the screen. I didn't answer. She called again, then a third time. By the seventh call, I sent her a text. Go to your real dad. He seems like the one you care about. I turned off the phone after that. I didn't need to hear the outrage. Not today. There was something poetic in the timing. While she was likely nursing a hangover and basking in the attention of her social circle, she hadn't yet realized her financial safety net had been pulled. She hadn't yet gone home to find her belongings outside the gate. That moment of realization, that drop from grace, was still hours away, and I didn't dread it. I welcomed it, not out of spite, but out of necessity. She needed to see the line. She needed to understand that love has limits when it's abused long enough. I wasn't being cruel. I was being clear, and that, for once, felt like justice. The morning air had a different texture that day, cleaner, quieter. I didn't realize how suffocating the air had become in my own house until I took that first breath without the weight of her expectations pressing against my chest. I took my time making breakfast. Max sat patiently by the table, tail thumping against the hardwood, the kind of silent loyalty I had always longed for in return from my own blood. I knew the moment wouldn't last forever. Eventually, she'd notice the cards didn't work. Eventually, she'd come home. But in that space between offense and discovery, I found peace. And I relished it. I sat in the same chair she used to perch in when she was a child, knees tucked under, chattering about school, and I allowed myself to mourn her. Not the woman she had become, but the little girl I had loved with all my might. That child was gone. And now, so was the open door. My lawyer called me at 9:03 a.m. sharp. Marcus, he said, cautious, the way people get when they've known you long enough to feel the tremor in your voice without hearing it. You sure about this? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. I want everything removed. She gets nothing. Not the house. Not the account. Not a key to the front gate. It all goes to Max. He paused. The dog. Yes, I repeated. The dog. The only soul under this roof who's ever given me unconditional love. He sighed, scribbled notes, then said he'd draw up the new documents and have them sent over for signature by end of day. I thanked him. Then I poured myself a second cup of coffee and watched the sun crawl across the floor like it had been waiting years to reach me. The first call came just after noon. Her number flashed across the screen like a trigger warning. I stared at it, hands calm, heart still. I didn't answer. Then another call came, and another. By the seventh ring, I typed out the text that had been writing itself in my head all morning. You may go and live in your real dad's house. I sent it without emotion. No anger. No spite. Just truth. She had made her choice. At her party, in front of the people who mattered most, She'd drawn the line in neon lights. I was the ATM. He was the father. Fine. Let that choice come with its consequences. I was done playing provider while being painted as a relic. The silence that followed was short-lived. By 3 p.m., she had sent 17 missed calls. Then came the first voicemail, then another. Then a text, "What the hell, Dad?" followed by a string of angry emojis. I ignored them all. Around 5 p.m., I saw the security camera alert light up on my phone. She was home. Or rather, she had returned to what used to be her home. I tapped into the live feed and watched as she stood at the gate, staring at the 6 boxes stacked neatly beside it. Luggage, shoes, her framed degree, a few keepsakes. Nothing had been broken, nothing thrown. It was all there, just no longer welcome inside. She looked confused at first. Then she picked up her phone and the calls started again. My phone buzzed 28 times in under 10 minutes. I didn't answer a single one. At 6:42 p.m., the voice note came in. I didn't open it right away. I sat with it, phone face down, the way you might look at a sealed letter from someone who once meant everything, but now represented everything you needed to escape. When I finally played it, her voice came through fractured and raw, gasping between sobs. "I don't have anywhere to go," she cried. "It was just a joke, I swear. Please, Dad, please let me in." I didn't mean it. I was trying to be funny. Everyone was watching. "Please. I have nowhere else to go." Her voice broke on that last word. Go. She sounded like a child again. And maybe in some cruel twist of fate, I felt that old part of me stir, that protector, that father. But I didn't let him take the wheel. That man had been exploited one too many times. Instead, I did the only thing that felt right. I hit block. The voicemail disappeared into the void. Her number joined the others I'd cut over the years. Exes, fake friends, debt collectors from the years I borrowed to keep her in school. That night, I made dinner for one. Steak, medium rare. A bottle of red. Max got the trimmings. I toasted the air, raised my glass to no one in particular, and said, "Here's to finally choosing myself." For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like a father failing to meet expectations. I felt like a man reclaiming his name. I won't pretend there wasn't a hollowness in the quiet moments. There was. After all, I had spent 24 years shaping my entire identity around being her dad. Not just in title, but in purpose. Every decision, every sacrifice, every late-night shift, it was all for her. So yes, the silence came. But it wasn't grief. It was detox. It was my soul recalibrating after years of neglect. I knew the calls would come again, probably from her mother, maybe from extended family. I could already hear the accusations forming. "You overreacted. She was just joking. You're ruining your relationship over one night." But they hadn't seen the full story. They hadn't lived the slow erasure. The years of being tolerated, not loved. They hadn't heard her say, without flinching, that I was just an ATM. No, this wasn't about a single party. It was about decades of silent dismissal dressed up as independence. It was about realizing too late that giving someone everything does not teach them gratitude. It teaches them entitlement. And I wasn't willing to play that role anymore. I wasn't just changing my will. I was changing my life. And as I curled up on the couch with Max's head resting on my lap, I felt the kind of peace that comes when you finally stop waiting for someone else to love you the way you love them. I replayed the voice note once, then deleted it. Not because I didn't hear the pain in her voice. I did. I heard it loud and clear. But I had spent too many years mistaking someone's discomfort for my responsibility. Every time she fell short, every time she made a mistake, I had swooped in like some broken-winged guardian, bandaging her missteps with my wallet and my silence. And where had that gotten me? A room full of strangers laughing at my expense while she handed out loyalty to a man who'd never spent a single sleepless night worrying about how to keep the lights on for her. No, this time, I wasn't going to be the cushion to soften her fall. Let her feel it. Let her feel exactly what it means to burn a bridge you thought would always be there. She hadn't expected me to go quiet. That much was obvious. Her entire life, I'd been the one to call back. To cave. To apologize for things I didn't even do just to keep the relationship from fraying further. But this time, I gave her the one thing she never saw coming: indifference. I didn't argue. I didn't scold. I didn't even dignify her tears with a response. Instead, I took Max for a walk around the neighborhood, each step feeling lighter than the last. I passed by Mr. Carter, the retired mechanic who always waved from his porch. He looked up, noticed the looseness in my shoulders, and said, "You look different today, Marcus." Lighter. I smiled. I finally dropped something heavy. He chuckled, not pressing for details. And I was grateful. Not every pain needs a witness. Some just need release. When we got back, I saw the missed calls had slowed. The desperation in her messages was tapering into confusion, and I knew the next stage would be anger. That's how it always went. Cry, then rage. The victim-to-villain switch. Sure enough, the next text wasn't a plea. It was venom. "You're pathetic. You abandoned me when I needed you most. No real dad would ever do this." I read it twice, then a third time, not because it hurt, but because I was finally able to read her words without reacting. That text wasn't truth, it was habit, a reflex. She didn't know how else to operate when her safety net refused to stretch any further. I could almost hear her pacing, phone clutched in her hand, waiting for me to break. But I didn't. I couldn't afford to anymore. My self-worth had been bleeding out for too long to risk another wound. That evening, her mother called. I let it ring. Then the stepdad. His number came up as blocked, and for once, I felt proud of that label. They had their chance to guide her, to raise her with decency and perspective. Instead, they filled her head with poison and praise, teaching her that love was a vending machine. You press the right buttons, and the money spills out. That might have worked when she was a teenager, but she was a doctor now, an adult. And adults don't get to humiliate people and still expect access to their wallets and their homes. That's not parenting. That's enabling. And I was done being an accomplice in my own exploitation. The next morning, there were no new calls. Just silence. It surprised me how quickly the world kept spinning. The sun rose. The mail came. Max barked at the same delivery guy he always did. Life didn't grind to a halt because my daughter was mad at me, and realizing that shook something loose in me. I had built my identity around her for so long that I forgot I was allowed to exist separately, that I was allowed to have peace without needing her approval or presence. For the first time in years, I sat down and made a list of things I wanted, not for her, but for me. Travel. A new workshop in the garage. A weekend by the lake. It felt strange, indulgent even, to dream selfishly. But it also felt like healing. Around noon, a friend of mine, James, an old college buddy I hadn't seen in years, called. He'd heard about the party from someone who'd been there and wanted to check in. "Man, I don't even know what to say," he told me. That was brutal. I laughed, the first genuine laugh in days. "You don't have to say anything," I replied. She said enough for everyone. We talked for an hour. About old times. About family. About the difference between love and loyalty. He told me something that stuck. "You raised her to be a doctor. She should be smart enough to understand consequences." It was such a simple truth, but one I'd avoided for too long. I had been protecting her from consequences under the guise of love, and all I'd done was teach her to feel invincible. Later that night, I received one last message. It wasn't angry. It wasn't desperate. Just one sentence. "I didn't think you'd actually stop loving me." That one paused me. Not because it changed my mind. It didn't. But because it revealed just how deep the misunderstanding ran. She thought boundaries meant absence. That love with conditions wasn't love at all. But she was wrong. I still loved her. I probably always would, in some quiet corner of my heart. But love without self-respect isn't love. It's servitude. And I wasn't built to be someone's emotional punching bag anymore. I had the bruises to prove it. I didn't reply. Instead, I poured a glass of scotch, opened the patio door, and sat outside under a sky that had never once asked me to prove my worth. Max curled at my feet, content. The stars above didn't judge. They didn't ask me to forgive or to forget. They just shone, indifferent and infinite, reminding me that the world is vast, and I was allowed to take up space in it without apologizing. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe more silence. Maybe more messages. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going back. Not this time. And in that certainty, I found the kind of peace I had chased my whole life. The whispers started before the weekend ended. It was always the extended family first. Those cousins who hadn't called in 5 years suddenly becoming self-appointed therapists, dialing me up with a tone drenched in polite condemnation. My sister-in-law left a voicemail saying she was concerned about the mental toll this feud might be having on the family. Family. That word. It used to mean something to me. It used to represent a bond that could stretch, bend, but never break. Now, it felt like a leash, one they'd yanked any time I tried to choose myself. I listened to her message, then deleted it. She hadn't called when I nearly lost the house to pay tuition. She hadn't texted when I spent Christmas alone because my daughter decided her stepdad's tree was more photogenic. But now she cared, because my daughter's tears were public, because I dared to push back. It wasn't concern. It was optics. The real dagger came a day later from my ex-wife. She emailed me, which alone told me she wanted her words on record. She wrote, "I can't believe you'd abandon your daughter over a joke. You've always been dramatic, Marcus. This is why she doesn't feel close to you. You make everything about yourself." I read that line over and over, feeling the sting of its intention. But all it did was confirm what I'd already come to accept. They never saw me as a person. Just a role. The father, the ex, the bank. I was supposed to absorb humiliation with grace. I was supposed to swallow pain quietly. And the second I didn't, I was the villain, the selfish one, the unstable parent. It was almost laughable how easily the narrative turned the moment I stepped out of the shadows and said, "No more." I expected the backlash. I braced for it. What I didn't expect was the quiet support that trickled in from unexpected places. James, my old friend, showed up with a case of beer and said, "You're a damn legend." He'd heard from someone who'd been at the party and said, the way she said it, "Man, like you were some stranger who just financed her dreams out of obligation." We sat on the porch that evening, the two of us watching the sky fade from blue to charcoal, and for the first time, I spoke the truth I'd buried for years. I think I created her. I fed the beast. He didn't argue. He just nodded. Maybe. But you killed it, too. And that takes guts. Even Max, in his own loyal, wordless way, seemed to sense the shift. He stuck closer to me those days, resting his head on my foot during meals, curling beside the bed instead of his usual spot near the window. That dog had seen me through more breakdowns than any human. He'd licked my face when I came home the night the divorce papers were finalized. He'd sat by the door the night my daughter texted me from the airport saying she'd rather spend the holidays in Cancun with her mom. He had no agenda, no judgment, just presence. Unwavering, steady presence. It's funny how the creatures we feed out of habit sometimes become the only ones who feed our souls back. The legal paperwork came through 3 days later. My lawyer sent me the updated will with a note. All assets, including property, investments, and retirement accounts, to be transferred to beneficiary, Max. Of course, Max couldn't legally inherit everything, so we created a trust. A vet tech I trusted would be the executor, ensuring Max's care for the rest of his life. The rest of the money, every cent, would go to a scholarship fund I created in the name of my late mother. A woman who once told me, "Don't let people eat you alive just because you raised them." It felt right. It felt final. My daughter wouldn't be left destitute. She had a degree, a license, connections. She had everything I bought with my sweat and silence. She just didn't have me anymore. And yet, the text continued, shorter now, angrier, more scattered. "I can't believe you're really doing this. Everyone's talking about you. You're a disgrace." But the one that hit the hardest simply said, "You're ruining your legacy." That word, legacy. For so long, I believed she was my legacy. That if I could help her reach heights I never could, that would be enough. But what is a legacy if it ends with your name being mocked over a cocktail glass? What good is a legacy that teaches people it's okay to spit on the hands that lifted them? No, my legacy would be something else now. Peace, integrity, a final act of self-respect that said, I mattered too. One night, as the week drew to a close, a neighbor stopped me by the mailbox. Older guy, Vietnam vet. We'd only ever exchanged waves before. He looked at me with a kind of respect I hadn't earned in his eyes before. "Heard about what you did," he said. "Took guts." I nodded, not sure what to say. He leaned in slightly and added, "My daughter cut me out for years. Only came back when she wanted my land. I said no, and she called me a failure." His eyes softened. "You ain't a failure, Marcus. You're just done being used. There's a difference." We shook hands. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like a man again, not just a machine. That night, I walked the halls of my home, quieter than ever, and took in the photos still hanging on the walls. There were baby pictures, middle school science fairs, high school dance portraits. I didn't take them down, not out of nostalgia, not out of hope, but because those moments were real. I had loved her then. I had shown up then. My heart had been in it, even if hers had drifted away. And I wouldn't erase that. I wouldn't let bitterness stain the truth of my efforts. I just wasn't going to keep adding chapters to a story that no longer honored me. There's a strange quiet that follows a personal revolution. Not silence in the literal sense, but a hush that settles in your bones once the battle is over. No more rehearsing responses. No more checking your phone for incoming emotional landmines. Just calm. Stillness. It didn't happen all at once. For a few days, I still woke up half expecting another message, some new manipulation disguised as regret. But it never came. Her digital presence vanished into the ether, replaced by the occasional screenshot forwarded by someone else. Her social media posts, carefully curated to paint me as cruel, ungrateful, emotionally unstable. "Some fathers only love conditionally," she wrote once, under a filtered photo of her hugging her stepdad. I stared at it for a minute, then closed the app. It didn't sting the way it used to. It just proved I'd been right to let go. Peace doesn't come when people apologize. It comes when you stop needing the apology to move forward. And I did move forward, quietly, deliberately. I planted new things in the garden, replaced the upstairs carpet, took Max for longer walks, even reconnected with a few old friends I had unintentionally shut out during my years of tunnel vision parenting. I had given everything to a daughter who saw me as a bank statement, and in doing so, I had drained myself of joy, of friendship, of hobbies, of self-worth. Now I was reclaiming it all, piece by piece. I signed up for a woodworking class, started reading again, cooked meals that didn't involve frozen pizza and silent dinners. The house felt more like a home without the constant tension humming beneath the surface. But healing wasn't linear. Some nights, I'd still think about her. Wonder where she was sleeping, whether she was scared, whether she regretted it. I wasn't immune to guilt. I just didn't let it steer anymore. One night, while clearing out an old drawer, I found a picture of us from when she was 6. We were at a state fair, cotton candy smeared across her face, her tiny hand gripping mine like I was the whole world. And back then I was. I traced the edge of the photo with my thumb, remembering the way she used to giggle when I carried her on my shoulders. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just whispered, "I miss who you used to be," and placed the photo back into the drawer. Some things deserve to stay remembered, but not all memories need to be resurrected. I never officially announced that I had disowned her. No social media rants. No mass texts. I didn't need validation or applause. I just changed the locks, changed the will, changed the energy in my life. Still, word got around, and slowly, something unexpected happened. People started coming out of the woodwork, not to criticize, but to confide. Men I'd known for years who had been quietly bleeding behind closed doors. One told me his son only visited when he needed loan co-signatures. Another said his daughter hadn't spoken to him in a decade, except to request money for a destination wedding he wasn't invited to. We weren't angry dads. We were exhausted ones. And hearing their stories helped me feel less alone. It wasn't just me. This was a pattern. A generational blind spot. We'd been taught that good fathers give everything. No one ever warned us that sometimes everything isn't enough. A month passed. Then 2. Life settled into its new rhythm. Then, out of nowhere, I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. I sat on the porch for a long time before opening it. Max curled at my feet like a sentry. The letter was short. Just a page. No apologies. No justifications. But it was honest. She wrote, "I know I hurt you. I don't know how to undo it. But I've been thinking about everything. And I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking to come back. I just wanted to say I see it now. I see what I did. And I'm sorry you had to teach me this way for me to learn. I read it 3 times. Not because I was considering reconciliation, but because it was the first time in years she had spoken to me without asking for something. I didn't respond. Not because I was punishing her, but because the peace I had built was delicate and I wasn't ready to let her near it yet. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. They just need to be left behind with a nod of acknowledgement. I placed the letter in a box in the closet, right beside the stethoscope I'd given her, the one she never mentioned again. Maybe one day I'd write her back. Maybe not. But I appreciated the gesture for what it was, a crack in the armor, not a door. And for now, that was enough. Looking back, I don't regret what I did. People will call it extreme. Some already have. But boundaries only seem cruel to those who've benefited from your lack of them. I had spent years handing out grace like candy while starving for it myself. All I ever wanted was to be seen, to be appreciated, to be loved not for what I could provide, but for who I was. And when that didn't happen, I chose me. I chose quiet mornings with Max. I chose dinner without tension. I chose dignity. And I would choose it again 100 times over. To any father listening, any parent, really, who feels like they're being slowly erased by their own generosity, I want to say this. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to say no. Love should never cost you your soul. We don't talk enough about the parents who are left behind emotionally, who get thanked with silence or jokes or condescension. But I see you, and I hope you see me, too. Not as a cautionary tale, but as a man who learned the hardest truth of all. Sometimes the best way to love someone is to walk away from them. If you've ever had to choose peace over family, dignity over tradition, or healing over toxic loyalty, this story is for you. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved just to protect yourself? Share your truth, because your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear tonight. And if this story spoke to you, don't forget to like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more real stories about love, boundaries, and letting go. See you soon in the next story.